Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I've learned as I have grown into the person that I am today. And I have had such an amazing day today. I got up, Alex had to work this morning, and then he and his friend Sarah went to brunch. I was still asleep, or I would have gone with them. I slept in today a little bit. And then they drove to Chicago because they're hanging out with some friends from college, and then they're gonna drive back later tonight. So I have just been kind of to myself all day today, and okay, sometimes I get lonely, but when I know that I'm gonna have an entire day and night to myself, I kind of love it, right? Because I'm like, okay, I can have all the food I want to have. Not all the food, but you know what I mean? I can eat what I want to eat, and which I do anyway, you know what I mean? But I can go to the pool and just hang out as long as I want. I can take a nap when I want to, and I don't have to get up at any time. I can watch a movie if I want. I can do whatever I really want, for a day. And then we're going to go to brunch tomorrow, and he and I are going to hang out all day tomorrow. So that'll be really fun. And then next week is our anniversary, and Alex is taking off Thursday and Friday. So we're going to have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's like a little staycation. We usually go to Las Vegas every year for our anniversary because that's where we got married. It'll be 8 years together, married, next week, and 12 years total together. Crazy, isn't it? So listen. Working hard on your marriage, okay, marriage is not easy. Working hard on your marriage or your coupleship, or your, whatever, your relationship, is totally worth it, okay? And I believe getting through the tough times just makes it 100 times more worth it, honestly. And, I've talked on here so much about, counseling and marriage counseling and what we went through, and I'm such a believer in it. If you're out there and you feel we could probably improve our talking, or, if things are bad, I think we were almost towards the end of where things were really, really bad, that we probably wouldn't even be together right now, And I look back on that and I think, man, we came so far, and I was the one that was resistant to going at first. It was Alex that was asking to go, and it completely changed our lives. It absolutely completely changed our lives, when I look at marriage counseling and what it did for us. And it was just simple things too, Well, hey, let me give you an example. And I could give you 100 examples of things he needed to work on and 100 examples of things that I needed to work on, but I will give you one example. When we talk about communication, better communication, which is one thing that happens in relationship or in counseling, but we also talked about the 12 forms of intimacy, which you can look up online, and all kinds of things, and very specific things, and baggage we brought into the relationship, and things we had done to hurt each other, and things like that we weren't even aware of, right? I don't want people to think that hurt each other, that has never occurred in our relationship. But just, baggage that we brought and things that we've said to one another that we've held on to and had resentments with, which I'm going to read in just a second about resentments. But, one of the things as far as communication, this is when people say oh, you need to improve your communication, but they don't really define what that means, right? Okay, for us, let me give you an example. So, Alex is somebody that, I'm going to give you one for him and one for me, okay? Alex is somebody that, because he grew up with two brothers, and I'm an only child, that this is how he used to think. He doesn't think or communicate this way anymore. But he used to kind of think, either you're to blame or I'm to blame. If something's wrong, if I bring up an issue, and I'm because I speak a different language when I speak in recovery, right? And I'm this really hurt that, you said this, or that you did this, or whatever. If he heard that prior to counseling, he would be okay, so I'm the bad person then, right? I'm no, you're not the bad person. It's just I'm sharing my feelings and emotions. Okay, but you're bringing that up because I did that and I hurt you, but I didn't mean to, but I'm still the bad person, right? So when we got into counseling, it was really about just this kind of tennis listening. Does that make sense? Tennis match listening, where I say this is how I feel, which is corny, right? We say that, but it really to really listen when somebody tells you how they feel and allows themselves to be vulnerable is pretty magical. It really, really is. And then he would repeat it back, and he would say, okay, so what I hear you saying is, and I can tell you, when we first started it, he'd say, what I hear you saying is that I hurt your feelings and you think that I did it on purpose. And I'm no, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is, I don't think you're aware that hurt my feelings, and I just want you to know so in the future you don't do it again. And he would say, okay. And then we would kind of learn to communicate that way. Another thing is, I still do this, and I've been I rarely do it Rarely. I rarely do it anymore because I work so hard on it. But I would say never and always, okay? And I would say things like, you never do this. You always do this. And he'd be like, oh, really? Never? Like, I've never brought you flowers? Or like, oh, I always do this? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and that was how we communicate to each other. And so when you communicate to each other with like absolutes like that, like never and always, what that person hears on the other side is, well, I never do anything good enough. And I'm always doing things that aren't good enough, whatever, right? And so you take it, and it's like language that we think is really not that big of a deal, communication, words that we're using, right? But we're not breaking them down and translating them. And so we push them down. Well, now, okay, that he doesn't feel like it's a blame game, okay? And I don't use words like never or always. We don't get into half the arguments and fights that we used to, you know? And that's just 2 examples of probably 100 things that we worked on communication-wise, of learning how, it's really about like, you know, like, so Alex is like, you know, his first language is Spanish. It would really be like if Alex spoke Spanish and didn't understand English, and I spoke English and didn't understand Spanish, and we would try to speak to each other, but we didn't really understand each other, so we would need somebody to translate with us, and that's what our counselor did, you know? And so we could kind of understand each other and start communicating. Does that make sense? I can't even tell you, like, that's why I say it's magical, because when you all of a sudden see that person and you're like, you get them like in that instant, and you love them, and then you realize there's all these reasons why they're that way, but you love them for all of that too. Like, it makes you love them even deeper, like, because then you're protective of them even more so than you were before, you know? So if you're out there and you're thinking about like marriage counseling, please do. I mean, Alex and I like never argue anymore. And I used to be somebody that would say like, I think arguing is really normal for relationships. I do, you know? And I think to have little fights here, I mean, we get into little stupid things. I'm trying to, last night we had something like, something about like, well, I was actually filming a Peterisms video, and he had told like his friend Sarah to come over because we were having dinner on the patio at 6:30, and he said he told me, but he didn't tell me. And so I'm sitting here filming, and Sarah rings the doorbell or knocks on the door, and I'm like, the dog started barking and stuff, and I was like, what is going on, right? So when he came home, like 5 minutes later, I was like, could you have told me? And he's like, I did tell you. And I was like, no, you didn't, right? He was like, okay, well, I'm sorry. And I'm like, well, that's cool. I just wish, like, in the future, will you let me know? He's like, yeah, absolutely. And that's how we like don't argue and fight and stuff today, you know? It's like we actually like, you know, sit there and listen, or he'll say something to me like, hey, this or whatever, you know? And then I'll be like, oh, okay, like I see it from your point of view. And it's really about putting yourself in the other person's shoes. Like, it's all To Kill a Mockingbird, you know? Walking around on their front porch for a while and seeing where they're coming from. And that's really what a marriage is. Alex and I used to fight about stuff like this, okay? I didn't take the trash out. He didn't take the trash out. I can't believe that you didn't take the trash out. Our trash is full. Well, you know what? I forgot. F you. Well, F you. You don't care about me anyway. Well, you never take the trash out. You don't do anything around the house. Well, I don't do anything around the house, and you don't do. I mean, and all of a sudden we are up here and we're talking about things that happened 8 years ago, 10 years ago. And we're no longer having a fight, and the fight is having us. If you are in a relationship where that is the case, where you start off with like who fed the dogs, or, you know, like somebody forgot to pick up something at like the dry cleaner, and all of a sudden that fight is escalating to a point where it's like, you don't care about me, okay, which is not what that fight is about. That's not what that argument, that discussion is about, you know? When you're escalating from that point to levels of, this is what you did to me 8 years ago and it still hurts, within a matter of a half an hour or an hour, you need to get into marriage counseling immediately, I'm telling you, okay? Because that's where we were. We were at a point where it was like, we almost like couldn't even really have discussions anymore, because and there's a difference between a discussion and an argument, you know, or whatever. But we couldn't even have discussions anymore because like, we were so like, we were talking about being guarded the other day. We were so guarded with our emotions and our feelings, but we also at the same time felt hurt. Like, Alex and I are so protective of each other anymore, and so protective of our marriage. And that's not to say that we're perfect. We're not. Like, we still hurt each other, right? But we're open to hearing what the other person has to say today, you know? And it's like, we learned all of that in marriage counseling. But before that, oh my God, we were having these like ruthless, I mean, we would say hurtful things to each other while we were arguing, and then it would always be like, well, you don't care about me, and I don't know why I'm here. Well, I don't know why I'm here either, and I don't know what we're doing anymore. We might as well just get divorced. Okay, well, are you serious about it? Hold on a second. 45 minutes before, we were planning about where we were going to dinner. Okay, and where we were going to dinner, and I wanted Chinese and you wanted pizza, and you always pick, and you pick something I don't want, turned into, well, maybe we should get divorced. What is wrong with that scenario? And I know there's a lot of people that would say, well, then maybe that's the condition of your relationship and you should get married or get divorced. I didn't get married to give up my marriage that easily, and I hope most people out there don't. And I am so happy that my husband and I fought for it, you know? We don't argue like that today. We never let it get to that point. And whenever we can start even feeling it that way, like maybe Alex has had a 10-hour day and he has dealt with people all day long being like up in his face, and he comes home and he's like, babe, I'm tired, right? And let's say if we start having a conversation where I'm like, hey, like, can you do this or whatever? And like he'll say, I'm really tired. Like, can you just give me a couple hours? Maybe we can talk about this tomorrow. You know, or if we start like having a discussion and I'm like, because you know, some days I'm real emotional. Y'all know that, right? And, let's say I'm getting real emotional about something and I can just feel it inside. You know, I'll be like, babe, this isn't the day. Like, we can't have this conversation today. And he'll be like, okay, well, can we have this conversation in a couple days because it's important? I'll be like, yeah, but today's not the day. You know, and so we are really protective of each other's emotions and feelings so that we don't go there, right? Because that's not a safe place for us to go. And that's not a safe place for our marriage to go, you know? We don't argue like that today. And the other thing is that we are engaged with each other. You know, I get so many comments and people are like, you and Alex never spend any time together. Alex and I spend so much time together that I think we need a break from each other every once in a while. It's kind of like when your mom, you know, when you're younger and you're like playing with each other. I mean, people don't see, like, even though I film 5 videos, I film them all in like an hour and a half and I vlog at night, right? But we lay in bed for like 2 hours every night. We watch TV together, you know, we go out to dinner all the time together and all this kind of stuff, you know? And so it's like, sometimes you like need kind of a little break from each other. And I think to communicate that to one another is important too, you know? But I think that you have to be as passionate about your marriage as you are about anything else in your life, and as protective. You know, I was in 2 other relationships that, like, I don't know if they would have lasted if we got into counseling. I don't know. But I do know that I didn't put any investment and energy into trying to make them work. And when I got into this one, I was kind of like, this is how I thought. Like, if this marriage doesn't work, I'm going to be single for the rest of my life. I don't want to go through this again. It's too much work, families, and all that kind of stuff, right? And then when Alex was like, let's go to counseling, I was like, I don't know. I don't know that I want to do the work. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, to be honest with you, at that time, I was like, I don't even know that it's worth it to me. Like, sometimes it's easier just to walk away. And I remember when he looked at me and he said, we're either going to go to counseling or we're going to get divorced. And I was like, okay, I'm not willing to like let that happen. Best thing that we ever did was go to counseling. Get a counselor. If you're sitting there and you're like, oh my God, he's talking about me. Like, he's talking about us. You know, show your husband or wife or partner or whatever, you know, your significant other this video and say, like, this worked for Peter and Alex. Can we please at least give it a try? Can we at least just go to a couple sessions? You know, if you don't like it, we'll go to somebody else or we'll give up. But, like, we deserve this. Our communication has improved. We love each other. Okay, we like each other, which is huge. And he's my best friend, you know? I mean, I always talk about my good Judy Tanya being my best friend. She is, but not in a way. I don't want to be passionate and romantic with her. My husband's my partner in crime. He's my life partner, you know? I love everything about him. My eyes are hurting from the pool. I love everything about him. And there are things that I don't like about him, but I do love everything about him, you know? I don't know that I could have said that 5 years ago. There was a lot that pissed me off about him. And I love our marriage. I'm very, very proud of our marriage today. So if you're in that relationship out there, please, please fight for it. It's worth it. And it doesn't even have to be a marriage. It can be, you know, a domestic partnership, or it can be just, hey, we've lived together for 3 years or 2 years, you know. I think the first 3 years are sometimes the most difficult. I wish, like, Alex tells everybody now, like, when we, like, have friends of ours, he's like, people will say, like, oh my God, you guys talk, because we talk a lot about marriage counseling and how good it was for us. And we want to find somebody else right now too, but with the Zoom calls and stuff, we want to go to somebody in person, and a lot of people aren't doing that right now. So we're going to wait until that, like, you can start going back to somebody, you know, in person. But anyway, Alex said, it would be difficult here too, because, like, Alex would have to do his individuals with me here. I mean, we have a small place, and vice versa. I'd have to do my individuals alone with that person. But Alex always says to people, and they're like, well, how, like, early do you think that you should start counseling? He's like, right away. Like, if you're going to get married, like, have premarital counseling and, like, get in and talk about it. It's just going to make your marriage 100 times better. So why wouldn't you, you know? And what are you afraid of? Like, when I look back and I ask myself, what was I afraid of? I think I was really afraid of, like, you know, like, hey, we're going to lay all of our cards on the table and the counselor is going to say we didn't belong together anymore. But that never happened. The counselor never did that. You know, the counselor was just like, are you guys willing? I mean, he was like, are you willing to fight for your marriage? And we were both like, yeah. You You know, he didn't lay the cards on the table and say, this wasn't fortune-telling psychic mediumship, okay? It wasn't like, you know, the sun signs are telling me you guys don't belong together. And I don't listen, and y'all know I love mediums and psychics and all that kind of stuff, but I don't put a whole lot of faith in reading horoscopes that tell me, like, which two signs belong together and don't, okay? And my husband, when we got together, it broke my heart because I asked him if he believed in soulmates, and he said, no, I don't. He said, I believe that two people come together in this life, and they choose to be together and spend some time on this earth together and make a life together. And I was heartbroken over that because I loved the idea of soulmates. And I still believe in the idea of soulmates. I just don't necessarily believe that they have to be romantic. And in fact, I believe that my dog Pee-Pee was my soulmate. But I do believe in what Alex has to say. And who do you want to choose to spend your life with? I choose to spend it with my husband. We've built an amazing life together, and I don't want to give it up. I don't want to give it up at all, you know? So invest as much time and energy into your relationship and into your marriage as you would into anything else, you know? And likewise, if you're having problems with your mom or your dad, you know, like, and you're older, like, go to counseling with your parents. Or if you have a sister or a brother that you just don't get along with, ask them, say, could we go to some counseling sessions and maybe just sit down and hear, maybe I need to hear where you're coming from. Maybe you need to hear where I'm coming from, and we can communicate better because I love you and I want you to be in my life. And I don't want to fight with you over Thanksgiving and Christmas and be like, thank God we made it through those holidays. Don't have to see you again till Easter. You know, like, that's sad. Like, these are people that we're spending our life with. Like, let's learn to get along with them better, you know? And I feel so blessed that my husband, you know, put that ultimatum out. We would not be together right now. We just wouldn't. And not because he would say, if you're not willing to go to counseling, then we're done, which he probably would have, but because we wouldn't have made it. And the thing is, it would have ended really ugly too, because we would have, like, I think we would have fought each other till the end and just, like, broke each other down until we were both so hurt by it, you know, that we're like, yeah, we don't need to be together anymore. Like, this, why are we doing this to each other? And that's sad, isn't it? Have you ever been? I don't want to go through that. I don't want to go through that kind of breakup. I don't want to go through a breakup at all, but, like, not to end it that way, you know? Like, that's really hard, and I don't want to ever have to experience that with my husband, you know? If at some point we decide that this marriage isn't for us anymore for whatever reasons, you know, I know that we'll at least give it, like, some therapy and counseling before we make that decision, and we're not there today, you know? Not at all. Like, we just kind of missed the bouncing off of it. I mean, like, let's just say this, okay? We would leave counseling and come home and practice some of the 12 forms of intimacy. Not to be too much information, but we would, because we would sit in that room and, like, we would, like, emotionally really bond, you know? And then we would bring that home with us and emotionally really bond. You know, I want that. I want that with my husband. I'm proud of my marriage, and I'm proud of my husband, and I'm proud of myself for all of, you know, for he and I both working on it. So invest in your marriage. And I feel like this is like an advertisement for marriage counseling. I was going to read these books, but I'm not going to read them today. They were about resentment and family responsibility. We'll read them another day, probably next year. Anyway, let me know what you think about that in the comment section below. I'm begging you, if you're sitting out there and you're relating to what I'm saying, please ask your partner, whoever, to go to some kind of counseling, coaching, therapy, whatever, a weekend retreat, you know, to reignite the passion. There's a lot of great books out there. The 5 Love Languages book is fantastic. You know, is it the 5 Love Languages? That book is fantastic. Alex and I both read that. He read a lot more of it than I did, but I read enough to understand it. You know, like, that one was great. There's so many great books out there for, you know, marriage and counseling, or marriage counseling and coupling, you know, couples and relationships. So get online and just look and buy some books, you know. I will say the 5 Love Languages really, really helped us a lot to understand each other. And it'll help you understand other people in your life as well. And they have that book. The person that wrote the book, they wrote it for, like, I think, work environments and friends and things like that, family. So they have all of those out there to understand your language compared to other people. But, you know, while we're all sitting at home and we can't go places and stuff, what an amazing time to invest more time and energy, you know? Like, people ask me all the time, they're like, did you and Alex drive yourself crazy during the COVID? If you watch my vlogs, we got along so well. Like, I really was worried. I was like, this might be the end of us, you know? But we got along so well, and I missed him. Like, when he went back to work, I was like, I don't want you to go back to work. I miss you. So anyway, let me know what you think about all that in the comment section below. Invest in your relationship. It's worth it. It really is. Next to investing in yourself, investing in your relationship if you have one, or in your friendships or whatever relationships, but specifically your romantic relationships, next to investing in yourself, investing in romantic relationships is probably one of the most valuable things to do with your life. I love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.